I never thought I would be the kind of man who questions everything he knows about love and family. But here I am, sitting in my car in the driveway of what used to feel like home, engine off, hands gripping the steering while so tight my knuckles have gone white and bloodless. The leather is cold under my palms even though it is late August, and the heat outside is thick enough to taste. I can hear the cicadas screaming their endless summer song through the closed windows, that high-pitched drone that gets inside your head and stays there. My shirt is sticking to my back with sweat that has nothing to do with the temperature and everything to do with what I just discovered. The house in front of me looks exactly the same as it did this morning when I left for work. Same pale yellow siding that my wife Emma insisted we paint 3 years ago because she said it reminded her of sunshine and happiness. Same black shutters. Same flower boxes under the windows overflowing with petunias in shades of purple and white that my mother planted last spring, kneeling in the dirt with her gardening gloves on, telling me how a home needs color and life. The porch light is on even though the sun has not set yet, casting a warm glow that should feel welcoming, but instead feels like a trap, like a lure designed to draw me into something I cannot escape. I should go inside. I know I should, but my body will not move. My legs feel like they have been filled with concrete. My chest is tight, each breath coming shallow and quick like I have been running even though I have been sitting here motionless for 20 minutes, maybe longer. Time has become strange and elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that make no sense. The discovery happened by accident, the way these things always do. I was not looking for anything. I was not suspicious. I trusted them both completely, the way you trust the ground beneath your feet or the air you breathe. My wife Emma and my mother Patricia were the two most important women in my life, the foundation of everything I believed about family and loyalty and love. And now that foundation has cracked wide open, and I am falling through. It started this afternoon at the office. I work as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of steady, reliable job that pays the bills and funds the mortgage, and lets Emma stay home with our daughter Sophie, who just turned 6 last month. We had a birthday party in the backyard with a bounce house and a cake shaped like a unicorn, and Sophie laughed so hard she got the hiccups. Emma and my mother worked together to plan every detail, whispering and giggling like conspirators, and I remember thinking how lucky I was that they got along so well. Some men have wives and mothers who clash and compete, but mine were a team. Or so I thought. I was at my desk reviewing a client file when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. "Can you stop by the house after work? Need to talk about something important." "Nothing to worry about." The message seemed innocent enough, but there was something about the phrasing that made my stomach clench. My mother never texted me to come over. She just called or showed up. And the phrase "nothing to worry about" felt like exactly the kind of thing someone says when there is definitely something to worry about. I texted back asking if everything was okay, if she was feeling all right. She is 62 and in good health, but you never know. My father died of a heart attack when I was 19, sudden and shocking, and ever since then I have carried a low-level anxiety about losing her too. She responded quickly. "I am fine. Just need to discuss some paperwork. Can you come around 6? Paperwork. That word stuck with me. My mother is not the kind of person who deals with complicated paperwork. She is artistic and emotional, a retired art teacher who spends her days painting watercolors and volunteering at the community center. When she needs help with taxes or insurance forms, or anything involving numbers and legal language, she calls me. So what paperwork could she possibly need to discuss? The rest of the afternoon crawled by. I tried to focus on spreadsheets and tax codes, but my mind kept drifting back to that text message, turning it over and over like a puzzle I could not solve. At 5:30 I packed up my briefcase and headed out, telling my coworker Janet I had a family thing. She waved me off with a smile, and I walked through the parking garage to my car, my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls in a lonely rhythm. The drive to my mother's house takes about 15 minutes in normal traffic. She lives in a small ranch-style home in an older neighborhood where the trees are tall and thick and the sidewalks are cracked and uneven from decades of roots pushing up from below. I have known this route my entire life. I grew up in that house. I learned to ride a bike on that street. I kissed my first girlfriend on that porch. Every inch of it is soaked in memory and nostalgia. When I pulled up, my mother's car was in the driveway, but there was another car parked on the street in front of the house. A silver sedan that looked familiar, but I could not immediately place. I parked behind my mother's car and got out, the heat hitting me like a physical force. The air smelled like cut grass and honeysuckle, sweet and heavy. Somewhere nearby a dog was barking, a steady rhythmic sound that matched my heartbeat. I walked up the front path and knocked on the door, even though my mother always told me I did not need to knock, that this was my home too. Old habits. She opened the door almost immediately, as if she had been waiting right there. She was wearing a loose cotton dress in a floral pattern, her gray hair pulled back in a clip, her face breaking into a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Come in, sweetheart," she said, stepping aside. Her voice sounded normal, but there was a tightness around her mouth that I recognized from childhood, the expression she wore when she was nervous or hiding something. I stepped inside, and the cool air conditioning washed over me, raising goosebumps on my damp skin. The house smelled the way it always did, like lavender and old books and the faint lingering scent of oil paint. The living room was exactly as I remembered, cluttered with art supplies and half-finished canvases and stacks of books on every surface. My mother was not a tidy person. She said creativity and order could not coexist. "Who else is here?" I asked, thinking of the car outside. My mother's smile flickered. "Oh, just someone helping me with some things. Come into the kitchen." I followed her down the narrow hallway, past the family photos on the walls. Me as a baby. Me on my first day of school. Me and Emma on our wedding day, both of us grinning like we had won the lottery. Me holding newborn Sophie in the hospital, her tiny face scrunched and red. A whole life documented in frames. In the kitchen, sitting at the small round table with a cup of coffee in front of her, was Emma, my wife. In my mother's house in the middle of a weekday afternoon, when she should have been at home with Sophie. The surprise must have shown on my face because Emma stood up quickly, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor with a harsh sound that made me wince. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice too bright, too cheerful. "Your mom asked me to come over. Sophie is at my sister's place for a play date." I looked between the two of them, confusion swirling in my gut. Why would my mother ask Emma to come over without telling me? Why the secrecy? What paperwork could possibly involve both of them? "Sit down," my mother said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We need to talk to you about something." The way she said it, the gravity in her tone, made my mouth go dry. I sat down slowly, my briefcase still in my hand. I set it on the floor beside me. The kitchen was bright with late afternoon sunlight streaming through the window over the sink, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Normal sounds in a moment that felt anything but normal. "What is going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emma and my mother exchanged a look, one of those wordless communications that women seem to master, and then my mother reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was soft and papery, her grip gentle. "Sweetheart," she said, "we need to tell you something, and we need you to stay calm and listen." My heart started to pound. Those words, that tone, it was the preamble to bad news. Someone was sick. Someone was dying. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Emma sat back down and folded her hands on the table in front of her. She was wearing a blue sundress that I had always liked, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked young and pretty and nervous, her green eyes darting between me and my mother. "Your mom and I have been working on something together," Emma said slowly, carefully, like she was picking her way through a minefield. "A business opportunity. An investment." "An investment?" I repeated, confused. "What kind of investment?" My mother squeezed my hand. "You know how tight money has been," she said. "My pension is not much, and the house needs repairs, and I have been worried about my future. And Emma mentioned that you two have been stressed about finances too, with the mortgage and Sophie's expenses and everything." This was true. Money had been tight. Emma and I had argued about it more than once, late-night whispered fights in our bedroom about credit card bills and the cost of childcare, and whether we could afford a vacation this year. But we were managing. We were not desperate. "So what does that have to do with anything?" I asked. Emma leaned forward. "My mother's friend, Carol, you remember her, she told us about an investment opportunity. A real estate thing. Flipping houses. She said people were making incredible returns, doubling their money in just a few months." I felt a cold prickle of unease crawl up my spine. I am an accountant. I know about investments. I know about scams. And anything that promises to double your money in a few months is almost always too good to be true. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice coming out harder than I intended. My mother pulled her hand back. "We pooled our money," she said quietly. "I took out a home equity loan on this house. $25,000. And Emma used the money from your joint savings account." Another 15,000. We invested it all with Carol's contact. A man named Richard, who runs the real estate investment company. The words hit me like a physical blow. I could not breathe. Could not think. The kitchen seemed to tilt and spin around me. $40,000. Gone. Invested in some scheme without my knowledge or consent. You did what? I managed to choke out. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I know we should have told you, she said, her voice breaking. But you would have said no. You would have said it was too risky. And we needed this, Michael. We needed a way to get ahead, to stop struggling all the time. So you went behind my back, I said, my voice rising. You took money from our savings account, money we have been building for years, and you gave it to some stranger? He is not a stranger, my mother said defensively. Carol has known him for years. He has a whole portfolio of successful projects. Did you see any documentation? I demanded. Did you see contracts, proof of previous investments, anything? The silence that followed was answer enough. Oh my God, I said, standing up so fast my chair tipped backward and clattered to the floor. You got scammed. You both got scammed. We do not know that, Emma said, but her voice was weak, uncertain. Yes, we do, I said, my hands shaking. This is textbook fraud. Home equity loans, drained savings accounts, promises of huge returns, a friend of a friend connection. How could you be so stupid? The word hung in the air, cruel and sharp. My mother flinched like I had slapped her. Emma started to cry in earnest, tears streaming down her face. I am sorry, she sobbed. I am so sorry. We thought we were helping. We thought we were securing our future. When did this happen? I asked, trying to get control of my spiraling thoughts. When did you give him the money? 3 weeks ago, my mother whispered. 3 weeks. They had been lying to me for 3 weeks. Going about their daily lives, smiling and laughing and pretending everything was fine while sitting on this massive secret. Have you heard from him? I asked. This Richard person. Has he given you any updates, any returns? They both shook their heads. Have you tried to contact him? Yes, Emma said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I have called and texted. He responded a few times at first, saying everything was on track, but for the last week he has not answered at all. Of course he has not, I said bitterly, because he took your money and ran. That is what con artists do. I paced the small kitchen, my mind racing. $40,000. My mother's house was now at risk because of the home equity loan. Our savings were gone. Years of careful planning and saving, wiped out in one monumentally stupid decision. We need to go to the police, I said. We need to report this. No, my mother said quickly, standing up. We cannot do that. Why not? Because, she said, her voice trembling, Carol is my friend. If we report this, she will be implicated too. She could get in trouble. I stared at her in disbelief. You are more worried about protecting your friend than recovering your money? She did not know it was a scam, my mother insisted. She was a victim too. She invested her own money. Or she was in on it, I shot back. Did you ever think of that? That maybe Carol was part of the con? That she was the one who brought you in as marks? My mother's face crumpled. No, she whispered. Carol would not do that to me. But the doubt was there now. I could see it in her eyes. The terrible dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, she had been betrayed by someone she trusted. I turned to Emma. Did you meet this Richard person? Did you see him face to face? She nodded. Once. When we gave him the money. He came to Carol's house. He was very professional, very polished. He had business cards and a presentation on his laptop showing all these properties he had flipped. Did you get copies of anything? Contracts, receipts, anything in writing? She hesitated. We signed some papers, she said slowly. He said they were investment agreements. He gave us copies. Where are they? I demanded. Emma got up and went to her purse, which was hanging on the back of her chair. She pulled out a folder and handed it to me with shaking hands. I opened it and scanned the documents inside. They looked official enough at first glance, with legal-sounding language and signatures and dates. But as I read more carefully, I realized they were essentially worthless. Vague promises with no specific details about properties or timelines or guarantees. No company address, just a P.O. box. No business license number. Nothing that could be used to track this person down or hold him accountable. These are garbage, I said, throwing the folder on the table. These would not hold up in any court. They are designed to look legitimate while actually saying nothing. Emma sank back into her chair, her face pale. What are we going to do? She whispered. I do not know, I said honestly. I need to think. I need to figure out our options. But even as I said it, I knew the options were limited. We could report it to the police, but without solid evidence or a real address, the chances of recovering the money were slim. We could try to track down Richard ourselves, but that could be dangerous and probably futile. We could consult a lawyer, but that would cost money we no longer had. The betrayal was what hurt the most. Not just the money, though that was devastating enough, but the fact that the two people I trusted most in the world had conspired together, had made a massive financial decision that affected all of us, and had deliberately kept me in the dark. They had looked me in the eye every day for 3 weeks and lied by omission. They had smiled and kissed me and asked about my day while hiding this enormous secret. "I need to go," I said abruptly. "I cannot be here right now." "Michael, please," Emma said, reaching for me. "We need to talk about this." I stepped back, away from her touch. "There is nothing to talk about right now," I said. "You made your decision without me. Now I need time to process what you have done." I grabbed my briefcase and walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway, out the front door. Behind me I could hear Emma calling my name, but I did not stop. I got in my car and started the engine and drove, not back to our house, but just away, needing distance and space and air. I ended up at a park near the river, a place I used to come to as a teenager when I needed to think. I parked in the empty lot and walked down to the water's edge. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The river moved slowly, dark and smooth as glass. The air was cooler here, carrying the smell of mud and fish and green growing things. I sat on a bench and put my head in my hands. How had this happened? How had I missed the signs? Had there been signs? I tried to think back over the last few weeks, searching my memory for clues. Had Emma been acting strange? Had my mother? But I could not pinpoint anything specific. They had been normal. Or maybe I had just been oblivious, too caught up in my own routine, to notice what was happening right under my nose. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from Emma. "Please come home. We need to talk. Sophie is asking for you." Sophie, my daughter, my sweet, innocent 6-year-old who had no idea that her family's financial security had just been destroyed. How was I going to explain this to her? How was I going to look her in the eye and tell her that we might lose our house, that there would be no more dance classes or birthday parties or trips to the zoo? I texted back, "I will be home later. Need some time." Another text came through almost immediately. "I love you. I am so sorry. Please forgive me." I stared at those words for a long time. I love you. Did she? Did she really? Because love is supposed to be built on trust and honesty and partnership. And she had violated all of that. She had made a choice that affected our entire future without consulting me, without respecting me enough to include me in the decision. And my mother, God, my mother, the woman who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, who always told me that honesty was the most important value. She had looked me in the eye and lied. She had put her house at risk, the house where I grew up, the house filled with memories of my father. How could she be so reckless? I sat there until the sun disappeared completely, and the sky turned dark and the stars came out, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast emptiness. The park was silent except for the sound of the river and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a world that no longer made sense. Eventually I knew I had to go home. I could not hide forever. I had to face this, had to figure out how to move forward. I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting so long, and walked back to my car. The drive home was automatic, my hands steering while my mind churned through possibilities and scenarios and fears. When I pulled into the driveway, all the lights in the house were on, making it glow like a beacon in the darkness. Emma's car was there, which meant she had driven home from my mother's house. I wondered what they had talked about after I left. Had they cried together? Blamed themselves? Or had they blamed me for overreacting? I sat in the car for a moment, gathering my strength. Then I got out and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. I stepped inside and the familiar smell of home hit me, that unique combination of Emma's vanilla candles and the lavender laundry detergent she used, and the faint scent of the chicken she must have cooked for dinner. The television was on in the living room, playing some animated movie with bright colors and cheerful music that felt obscene given the circumstances. Emma appeared in the hallway, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. "Sophie was already asleep," she said quietly. "I told her you had to work late." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. I walked past her into the living room and sat on the couch. She followed and sat on the opposite end, maintaining distance, as if she knew I could not handle her being too close right now. "I have been thinking," she said, her voice hoarse. We need to do everything we can to fix this. I will get a job. I will go back to work. We can cut expenses, sell things, whatever it takes. That is not going to be enough, I said flatly. $40,000, Emma. Do you understand how much money that is? Even if you get a job, even if we cut every unnecessary expense, it will take us years to recover from this. And that is assuming we can keep the house, assuming my mother does not default on her loan and lose her home. She started crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. I know, she whispered. I know I messed up. I know I destroyed everything. But I was trying to help. I was trying to make things better for us. By lying to me? I said, my anger flaring again. By going behind my back and making a decision that affects our entire family, without even consulting me? You would have said no, she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. You always say no to everything. You are so cautious, so afraid of taking risks. I thought if I could just show you that it worked, that we could actually get ahead for once, you would understand. So this is my fault, I said incredulously. Because I am responsible with money, because I do not throw our life savings at obvious scams, that makes me the bad guy. That is not what I am saying, she protested. Then what are you saying? I demanded. Because it sounds like you are trying to justify what you did. It sounds like you are trying to make this about my flaws instead of your betrayal. She flinched at the word betrayal, but she did not deny it. We sat in silence for a long moment, the cheerful sounds of the movie filling the space between us. On the screen, cartoon characters were singing and dancing, celebrating some victory. It felt like a mockery. Did my mother put you up to this? I asked finally. Was it her idea? Emma shook her head. It was both of us, she said. Carol told your mom about the opportunity, and your mom mentioned it to me one day when I was over there. We started talking about how nice it would be to have some financial breathing room. And then Carol introduced us to Richard, and he was so convincing, Michael. He had all these success stories and testimonials and photos of properties he had renovated. It seemed legitimate. But you did not do any real research, I said. You did not look up his company, check his credentials, ask for references you could verify independently. You just took his word for it, because you wanted to believe it was real. She nodded miserably. You are right, she said. We were stupid. We were desperate and stupid, and now we have ruined everything. I wanted to comfort her. Some part of me, the part that still loved her despite everything, wanted to reach across the couch and hold her, and tell her it would be okay. But I could not. The hurt was too fresh, too raw. The trust that had been broken was not something that could be repaired with a hug and some soothing words. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight, I said, standing up. I cannot share a bed with you right now. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I went upstairs and checked on Sophie first. She was asleep in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals, her face peaceful and innocent. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, feeling my heart break all over again. She deserved better than this. She deserved parents who made smart decisions and protected her future. And we had failed her. I went to the guest room and closed the door. The room was small and sparsely furnished, used mostly for storage and the occasional overnight guest. I did not bother changing into pajamas. I just lay down on the bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I must have eventually fallen asleep, because I woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of Sophie's laughter downstairs. For a brief, blissful moment, I forgot about everything. Then it all came rushing back, and the weight of it pressed down on my chest like a physical thing. I got up and went downstairs. Emma was in the kitchen making breakfast, and Sophie was at the table coloring in a coloring book. When she saw me, her face lit up. Daddy! She squealed, jumping down from her chair and running to me. I scooped her up and held her tight, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. Good morning, princess, I said, forcing my voice to sound normal and cheerful. Mommy is making pancakes, she announced. With chocolate chips. Wow, that sounds delicious, I said, setting her down. Why do you not go finish your picture, and I will be right there. She skipped back to the table, oblivious to the tension in the room. Emma glanced at me over her shoulder, her eyes red and puffy. I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching her flip pancakes on the griddle. The kitchen smelled like butter and vanilla and chocolate, comforting smells that should have made me feel at home, but instead just made me feel sad. We need to make a plan, I said quietly, keeping my voice low so Sophie would not hear. We need to figure out exactly where we stand financially and what our options are. Emma nodded. I made a list last night, she said. All our accounts, all our debts, everything. I can show you after breakfast. We ate as a family, Sophie chattering happily about her playdate yesterday and a new game she wanted to play. Emma and I smiled and nodded and responded appropriately, putting on a show of normalcy for our daughter's sake. But underneath the surface, everything was fractured and wrong. After breakfast, Emma took Sophie outside to play in the backyard, and I sat at the kitchen table with Emma's list. It was worse than I thought. Our joint savings account, which had held just over $15,000, was now down to $312. Emma had withdrawn the rest in 3 separate transactions over the course of a week, probably to avoid triggering any alerts. Our checking account had enough to cover this month's mortgage and bills, but barely. We had about $8,000 in credit card debt that we had been slowly paying down. My retirement account through work was untouchable without severe penalties. Emma had a small retirement account from her previous job that had maybe $5,000 in it. And then there was my mother's situation. The home equity loan for $25,000 would have monthly payments of around $400, depending on the interest rate and terms. On her pension and Social Security, she might be able to afford that, but it would be tight. And if she missed payments, the bank could foreclose on her house. I pulled out my laptop and started doing calculations, running different scenarios. If Emma got a full-time job making, say, $30,000 a year, and we cut our expenses to the bone, we could probably stay afloat. But we would be living paycheck to paycheck with no safety net, no savings, no cushion for emergencies. And it would take years, maybe a decade, to rebuild what we had lost. I also started researching fraud and investment scams, looking for information about how to report them and what the chances of recovery were. The statistics were depressing. Most victims of investment fraud never recover their money. The perpetrators are often long gone by the time the victims realize they have been scammed, operating under fake names, and using untraceable methods of communication. I found the website for the Federal Trade Commission and filed a complaint, providing all the information I had about Richard and Carol and the fake investment company. I also filed a report with the local police department's fraud division. But I knew these were long shots. Without more concrete information, without a real name or address or bank account to trace, the authorities would have little to go on. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I considered not answering, but I knew I could not avoid her forever. "Hello," I said, my voice cold. "Michael," she said, and I could hear that she had been crying. "Please do not hate me. I know I made a terrible mistake. I know I let you down. But I am still your mother, and I love you, and I cannot bear the thought of you being angry with me." "I am not just angry, Mom," I said. "I am devastated. You put your house at risk. You helped Emma drain our savings. And you did it all behind my back." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I know, and I am so sorry. I have been up all night trying to figure out how to fix this. I called Carol this morning and confronted her. She swears she did not know it was a scam. She says Richard scammed her too, that she invested her own money, and has not been able to reach him either. Do you believe her?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I do not know," she admitted. "I want to believe her. She has been my friend for 15 years. But now I am questioning everything. We need to go to the police together," I said. "All of us. You, me, Emma, and Carol. We need to give them every piece of information we have and let them investigate." "Carol does not want to go to the police," my mother said hesitantly. "She is afraid of getting in trouble, of being seen as an accomplice." "Then that tells you something, does it not?" I said. "If she is innocent, she should want to help catch the person who scammed her. The fact that she is afraid suggests she knows more than she is letting on." My mother was quiet. "Maybe you are right," she said finally. "I will talk to her again. I will try to convince her. And Mom," I said, my voice softening slightly despite my anger, "you need to be prepared for the possibility that you might lose the house. If you cannot make the loan payments, the bank will foreclose. You need to start thinking about alternatives, about where you would live if that happens." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "I cannot lose this house," she said. "Your father and I bought this house. We raised you here. All my memories are here." "I know," I said gently. "But we have to be realistic. We have to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." After we hung up, I sat for a long time staring at nothing. The house was quiet except for the muffled sounds of Sophie playing outside and Emma's voice talking to her. Through the window I could see them in the backyard, Sophie on the swing set, Emma pushing her, both of them smiling. It looked like a scene from a happy family's life. But it was an illusion. Everything was an illusion. Over the next few days, I threw myself into damage control. I met with a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases. He was sympathetic but not optimistic. Without more information about Richard's real identity and whereabouts, he said, there was little legal recourse. He suggested we focus on trying to minimize the financial damage and rebuild as best we could. I also met with a financial advisor to discuss our options. She helped me create a strict budget that would allow us to keep the house and cover our basic expenses, but it required Emma to find work immediately and for us to cut out almost everything that was not essential. No more eating out. No more cable television. No more dance classes for Sophie or new clothes unless absolutely necessary. It was going to be a hard adjustment for all of us. Emma did start looking for work, sending out resumes and going to interviews. But the job market was tough, and she had been out of the workforce for 6 years. Most of the positions she was qualified for paid barely above minimum wage. Still, she kept trying, and I had to give her credit for that. She was not wallowing in self-pity or making excuses. She was trying to fix what she had broken. But the emotional distance between us remained. We were polite to each other, cooperative even, but the warmth and intimacy were gone. We did not laugh together anymore. We did not talk about anything beyond logistics and schedules. At night, I still slept in the guest room. I could not bring myself to share a bed with her, to be that vulnerable and close to someone who had betrayed me so completely. Sophie noticed, of course. Kids always notice. She started asking why Daddy was sleeping in the other room, why Mommy seemed sad all the time, why we were not going to her favorite restaurant anymore. We tried to shield her from the worst of it, tried to maintain some sense of normalcy, but it was impossible to hide everything. About 2 weeks after the initial revelation, I got a call from a detective with the police department's fraud division. He had been assigned to our case and wanted to meet with me to go over the details. I agreed immediately, hoping that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance of recovering some of the money. We met at a coffee shop near the police station. Detective Harris was a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes, the look of someone who had seen too much of humanity's worst. He ordered a black coffee, and I got the same, and we sat at a corner table away from the other customers. "I've been looking into your case," he said, pulling out a notebook. "And I have to be honest with you, Mr. Thompson. This is a sophisticated operation. The Richard you met is almost certainly using a fake name. The business cards and documents he provided are all fabricated. The P.O. box he listed is a dead end. We have seen this pattern before. So there is no way to find him?" I asked, my heart sinking. "I did not say that," Detective Harris replied. "We are working some angles. We are looking into Carol Bennett, your mother's friend. Her involvement is suspicious. Even if she was not directly part of the scam, she may have information that could help us track down the main perpetrator." "My mother will not like that," I said. "She still wants to believe Carol is innocent." "Most victims do," he said with a sad smile. "They do not want to believe that someone they trusted could hurt them. But in my experience, these scams often rely on inside connections. Someone who knows the victims, who can vouch for the scammer and make them seem legitimate. Carol fits that profile. What happens next?" I asked. "We will continue investigating," he said. "We will interview Carol, look into her financial records, see if we can find any connection to Richard or any suspicious transactions. But I want you to understand that even if we identify the perpetrator, recovering your money is unlikely. These people are professionals. They move the money quickly, often offshore, where it is nearly impossible to trace." I nodded, feeling the last bit of hope drain away. "So we are just supposed to accept that we have been robbed and move on?" "Unfortunately, that is the reality for most fraud victims," he said. "The best thing you can do now is focus on protecting yourself from further damage. Make sure all your accounts are secure. Monitor your credit, and be very careful about any future investment opportunities that seem too good to be true." We talked for a while longer, going over details and timelines. I gave him copies of all the documents Emma and my mother had received, along with the phone numbers and email addresses they had used to communicate with Richard. Detective Harris took notes and promised to keep me updated on any developments. When I left the coffee shop, I felt hollowed out, empty. The confirmation that we would probably never see that money again made it all feel so final, so irreversible. We had been robbed, and there was nothing we could do about it. That evening, I drove to my mother's house. I had not seen her in person since that first terrible day, though we had talked on the phone a few times. When she opened the door, I was shocked by how much she had aged in just 2 weeks. Her face was drawn and pale, her eyes sunken. She looked like she had lost weight. "Come in," she said quietly, stepping aside. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had played as a child, where I had opened Christmas presents and done homework and watched television with my father. Now it felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I met with a detective today, I told her. He is investigating the case. He wants to talk to Carol. My mother's hands twisted in her lap. I already told her, she said. She is very upset. She insists she is a victim too. Do you believe her? I asked again. My mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. I do not know what to believe anymore, she said. I thought I knew her. I thought I knew what she was capable of. But now I wonder if I ever really knew her at all. I understand that feeling, I said, and I was not just talking about Carol. My mother reached out and took my hand. I am so sorry, Michael, she said. I am sorry for what I did to you, to Emma, to Sophie. I am sorry for being foolish and naive. I am sorry for betraying your trust. If I could go back and change it, I would. But I cannot. All I can do is tell you how deeply I regret it and hope that someday you can forgive me. I looked at her, this woman who had raised me, who had sacrificed so much for me over the years. She had made a terrible mistake, a mistake that had cost us dearly. But she was still my mother. And despite everything, I still loved her. I am not ready to forgive you yet, I said honestly. But I am trying to understand. I am trying to see how this happened and why you made the choices you made. And maybe eventually we can find our way back to each other. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. That is all I can ask for, she whispered. We sat together in silence for a while, holding hands, two people trying to navigate the wreckage of a disaster they had helped create. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. The house creaked and settled around us, familiar sounds that had once meant comfort and safety, but now just felt sad. Over the following weeks, life settled into a new, uncomfortable rhythm. Emma found a job as a receptionist at a dental office, working 40 hours a week for $12 an hour. It was not much, but it was something. We enrolled Sophie in an after-school program at her elementary school, which was cheaper than a babysitter, but still stretched our already tight budget. Every penny had to be accounted for, every expense justified. I found myself becoming obsessed with money in a way I never had been before. I checked our bank accounts multiple times a day. I scrutinized every receipt, every bill, looking for ways to save even a few dollars. I started bringing lunch from home instead of buying it at the cafeteria. I stopped getting coffee on my way to work. I canceled subscriptions and memberships we did not absolutely need. It was exhausting and demoralizing, this constant vigilance, this feeling of scarcity. Emma and I existed in a state of cold civility. We coordinated schedules and divided household tasks and discussed Sophie's needs, but we did not really talk. Not about anything that mattered. The hurt and anger were still too fresh, too raw. Sometimes I would catch her looking at me with such sadness in her eyes, and I knew she wanted to bridge the gap between us, wanted to find a way back to what we had been. But I was not ready. I did not know if I would ever be ready. My mother struggled with the loan payments. The first month she managed, but barely. She called me in tears, saying she had to choose between groceries and the electric bill. I ended up giving her $200 from our already depleted checking account, money we could not afford to spare but that I could not refuse her. She was my mother. I could not let her starve or sit in the dark. Detective Harris called me periodically with updates, though there was rarely any real progress. They had interviewed Carol multiple times. She maintained her innocence, insisting she had been duped just like the rest of us. But her story had inconsistencies, details that did not quite add up. The detective said they were building a case, but it was slow going. Then, about 6 weeks after the initial discovery, something happened that changed everything. I was at work, reviewing a particularly tedious tax return, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer it anyway. "Is this Michael Thompson?" A woman's voice asked. She sounded nervous, speaking quickly and quietly. "Yes," I said. "Who is this?" "My name is Jennifer," she said. "Jennifer Marks. You do not know me, but I know about what happened to you. With Richard and the investment scam." My heart started to pound. "How do you know about that?" I asked. "Because he did the same thing to me," she said, "and to at least 3 other people I know of. We have been trying to track him down, trying to figure out who he really is and how to stop him." I stood up from my desk and walked quickly to an empty conference room, closing the door behind me for privacy. "Tell me everything," I said. Jennifer's story was eerily similar to ours. She had been introduced to Richard through a friend, someone she trusted. He had presented himself as a successful real estate investor with a track record of impressive returns. She had given him $30,000 of her retirement savings. That was 8 months ago. She had not heard from him in 6 months, and had eventually realized she had been scammed. But unlike us, Jennifer had not given up. She had started digging, researching, connecting with other victims. She had discovered that Richard was not his real name. The man they had all met was actually named David Brennan, and he had a history of running investment scams across multiple states. He would set up in a new area, find a local accomplice to help him gain trust and access to victims, run the scam for a few months, and then disappear before anyone could catch him. How did you find all this out? I asked, my mind reeling. I hired a private investigator, she said. It cost me $5,000 I could not afford, but I had to know. I had to do something. The PI tracked down some of his previous victims and pieced together his pattern. We think his real name might not even be David Brennan. That might be another alias. But it is more than we had before. Do the police know about this? I asked. I have tried to report it, she said. But without concrete evidence of his current location, they say there is not much they can do. These kinds of cases are low priority for them. So we have been trying to find him ourselves. We? I said. There are 5 of us now, she explained. 5 victims who have connected through online forums and support groups. We share information, pool our resources. We are determined to find him and make him pay. I want to help, I said immediately. Whatever you need, I am in. She gave me her email address and promised to send me all the information they had gathered. We talked for a few more minutes, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of something that might have been hope. Maybe we could not get our money back, but maybe we could stop him from hurting anyone else. Maybe we could get some kind of justice. When I got home that evening, Emma was in the kitchen making dinner. Sophie was at the table doing homework. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it made my chest ache. This was what we had almost lost. This was what we were still in danger of losing. I need to talk to you, I said to Emma. After dinner. She looked up, worry flashing across her face. Okay, she said quietly. We ate dinner as a family, and then Emma helped Sophie with her bath and bedtime routine, while I cleaned up the kitchen. When Sophie was finally asleep, Emma came downstairs and found me in the living room. She sat on the couch, keeping that careful distance between us. I got a call today, I said, and I told her everything Jennifer had told me. About David Brennan, about the other victims, about the possibility of tracking him down. Emma's eyes widened. So there is a chance we could get him arrested? She asked. Maybe, I said. But even if we do, that does not mean we will get our money back. It is probably long gone. But at least we could stop him from doing this to anyone else. What do you need from me? She asked. I need all the information you have, I said. Every email, every text message, every phone call. Anything that might help us track him down. And I need you to be prepared to talk to the other victims, to share your story. The more information we can gather, the better our chances. She nodded. I will do whatever it takes, she said. I want to help. I want to make this right. You cannot make it right, I said, the words coming out harsher than I intended. What is done is done. But you can help make sure he does not do this to anyone else. Her face crumpled, and I felt a pang of guilt. But I did not take the words back. They were true, even if they were cruel. Over the next few days, I became consumed with the investigation. Jennifer sent me files and documents, photos and timelines. I spent my evenings poring over them, looking for patterns and connections. Emma provided all the information she had, and I forwarded it to Jennifer and the group. We discovered that Carol, my mother's friend, had been involved in at least 2 other scams with David Brennan. She was not an innocent victim. She was his accomplice, his way into communities and social circles. She would identify potential marks, people with money and trust, and a desire to improve their financial situations. She would introduce them to David, vouch for him, make him seem legitimate. And then, after he had taken their money and disappeared, she would play the victim herself, deflecting suspicion. When I told my mother, she was devastated. She had known Carol for 15 years. They had been in a book club together, had gone on trips together, had shared holidays and birthdays and life's milestones. The betrayal cut even deeper than the financial loss. I trusted her, my mother said, her voice hollow. I told her things I never told anyone else. She knew about my fears, my insecurities, my financial worries. And she used all of that against me. I am sorry, Mom, I said, and I meant it. I was still angry with her for her role in this disaster, but I could also see how much she was suffering. Detective Harris was very interested in the information we had gathered. He said it gave them enough to bring Carol in for formal questioning, and possibly charge her as an accomplice. He also said they were working with law enforcement in other states to try to locate David Brennan. But even with all this progress, the reality remained that our money was gone. The investigation might lead to arrests and prosecutions, but it would not restore what we had lost. We still had to live with the consequences of that terrible decision. Emma and I continued our careful dance around each other. She worked her job at the dental office and came home exhausted every evening. I could see the toll it was taking on her, the physical and emotional strain. She had always been a stay-at-home mom, had always been there for Sophie, and now she was missing school events and bedtime stories and all the little moments that make up a childhood. It was breaking her heart, and part of me felt sorry for her. But another part of me, the angry, wounded part, thought she deserved to suffer for what she had done. Sophie was struggling too. She did not understand why everything had changed, why Mommy was always tired and Daddy was always stressed, and there was no money for the things she wanted. She started having nightmares, waking up crying in the middle of the night. Emma and I would take turns comforting her, rocking her back to sleep, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay even though we did not believe it ourselves. One night, about 3 months after the initial revelation, I was lying in the guest room bed staring at the ceiling when there was a soft knock on the door. Before I could respond, Emma opened it and stepped inside. She was wearing an old t-shirt and pajama pants, her hair loose around her shoulders. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked young and vulnerable and sad. "I cannot do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I cannot live like this, with you hating me, with this wall between us. I know I messed up. I know I betrayed you. But I am still your wife. I still love you, and I need to know if there is any chance you can forgive me, or if this is just over." I sat up, my heart pounding. "I do not hate you," I said quietly. "I am angry and hurt, and I do not trust you right now. But I do not hate you." "Then what do we do?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "How do we fix this?" "I do not know if we can," I said honestly. "You made a choice that showed you do not respect me or value my opinion. You went behind my back and made a decision that affected our entire family. How am I supposed to trust you again?" "I will do anything," she said desperately. "I will go to counseling. I will be completely transparent about everything. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I am trustworthy. Just please do not give up on us." I looked at her, this woman I had loved for 10 years, this woman who had given me a daughter and a home and a life. She had made a terrible mistake, but she was not a terrible person. She was flawed and human and desperate, just like me. "I am not giving up," I said finally. "But I need time. I need space to process this and figure out how I feel. And we need help. Professional help. We cannot do this alone." She nodded, relief washing over her face. "Okay," she said. "Whatever you need. Whatever it takes." She left the room, and I lay back down, feeling something shift inside me. It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a crack in the wall I had built around my heart, a tiny opening that might, eventually, let some light in. The next day I called our insurance company and found out that our health plan covered marriage counseling. I made an appointment for the following week. When I told Emma, she cried with what looked like gratitude and hope. Our first counseling session was awkward and painful. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Chen, asked us to tell our story. Emma cried through most of it. I stayed calm and factual, laying out the timeline of events like I was presenting a case to a client. Dr. Chen listened without judgment, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. At the end of the session, she said something that stuck with me. "Betrayal is one of the deepest wounds a relationship can suffer," she said. "But it does not have to be fatal. If both of you are willing to do the work, if you can learn to communicate honestly and rebuild trust slowly, there is a path forward. But it will not be easy, and it will not be quick." We committed to weekly sessions. Slowly, painfully, we started to talk about things we had never talked about before. Emma admitted that she had felt powerless and frustrated, that she had wanted to contribute financially, but felt trapped by her role as a stay-at-home mom. She said she had jumped at the investment opportunity because it seemed like a way to prove her worth, to show that she could make smart decisions and help the family. I admitted that I had been controlling about money, that I had made her feel like she did not have a say in financial decisions. I had not meant to, but I could see now how my caution and my need to be in charge had made her feel diminished and unimportant. It was hard to hear these things, hard to acknowledge my own role in creating an environment where Emma felt she had to go behind my back. But it was also necessary. We could not move forward without understanding how we had gotten here. My mother's situation continued to deteriorate. She missed a loan payment, and the bank sent her a warning letter. She called me in a panic, and I had to explain to her that if she missed another payment, they could start foreclosure proceedings. The thought of her losing the house, of her being homeless, was unbearable. I talked to Emma about it, and despite everything, despite our financial struggles, we agreed to help. We could not afford much, but we could give her a few $100s a month to help with the loan payment. It meant cutting even more from our already bare-bones budget, but it was the right thing to do. Then, for months after the initial discovery, Detective Harris called with news. They had arrested Carol. She had been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and was being held on bail. They had also located David Brennan in Florida, operating under yet another alias. Local authorities, they were working to arrest him. It felt like a victory, but a hollow one. Even if they were both convicted, even if they went to prison, it would not give us back what we had lost. Justice and restitution were not the same thing. The trial was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, life went on. Emma continued working at the dental office and started taking online classes to get a certification that would allow her to earn more money. I continued my job, continued our counseling sessions, continued trying to hold our family together. Sophie adjusted to the new normal, though she still asked sometimes why we could not do the things we used to do. We tried to make up for it in other ways, with free activities like trips to the park and the library, with homemade treats instead of store-bought ones, with extra cuddles and attention. She was resilient, the way kids are, but I knew this experience would shape her in ways we could not yet see. Slowly, incrementally, Emma and I started to heal. It was not a straight line. There were setbacks and arguments and nights when I still could not stand to be in the same room with her. But there were also moments of connection, brief flashes of the partnership we used to have. We laughed together for the first time in months when Sophie told us a silly joke she had learned at school. We held hands during a particularly difficult counseling session. We started sleeping in the same bed again, though it took weeks before I could bring myself to touch her beyond that. Dr. Chen told us that rebuilding trust was like building a house. You had to start with a foundation, lay it brick by brick, and be patient with the process. Some days it felt like we were making progress. Other days it felt like we were back at square one. My mother and I also slowly began to repair our relationship. She was genuinely remorseful, and she worked hard to show me that she understood the gravity of what she had done. She started seeing a therapist of her own to deal with the trauma of Carol's betrayal and the stress of her financial situation. We had dinner together once a week, just the two of us, and talked about things beyond the scam and the money. We talked about my father, about my childhood, about her hopes and fears. It was painful but also healing, this process of seeing each other as flawed human beings, rather than idealized versions of mother and son. The trial finally came. Carol pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution, though the amount she actually had to pay was a fraction of what she had helped steal. David Brennan, whose real name turned out to be Daniel Bradford, was extradited from Florida and also pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. It should have felt like closure, but it did not. The money was still gone. Our lives were still upended. The sentences felt inadequate for the damage they had caused. But in the aftermath of the trial, something shifted. Maybe it was knowing that they had been held accountable, even if imperfectly. Maybe it was the passage of time, the slow accumulation of days and weeks and months of working through our pain. Maybe it was the counseling and the hard conversations and the gradual rebuilding of trust. Whatever it was, I found myself able to look at Emma without feeling that sharp stab of betrayal. I found myself able to think about my mother without anger clouding my thoughts. I found myself able to imagine a future that was not defined by this one terrible event. One evening, almost a year after the initial discovery, Emma and I were sitting on the back porch after Sophie had gone to bed. It was late summer again, the air thick and warm, the cicadas singing their endless song. We were drinking iced tea and watching fireflies blink in the darkness of the yard. "Do you remember our first date?" Emma asked suddenly. I smiled. "Of course," I said. "We went to that Italian restaurant downtown, and you ordered something you could not pronounce, and it turned out to be squid, and you were too polite to send it back." She laughed, a real genuine laugh that I had not heard in so long. "I ate the whole thing," she said. "I was so determined to seem sophisticated and adventurous." "You threw up when you got home," I reminded her. "I did," she admitted, still laughing. "It was terrible. But you called me the next day anyway and asked me out again. Because I liked you, I said. Because even covered in squid-induced misery, you were the most interesting person I had ever met. She turned to look at me, her eyes shining in the porch light. Do you still think that? She asked quietly. Even after everything? I considered the question. The truth was complicated. She had hurt me in ways I had not known I could be hurt. She had broken something fundamental between us. But she had also worked tirelessly to repair it. She had been patient with my anger and my distance. She had taken responsibility for her actions and done everything in her power to make amends. Yes, I said finally. I still think that. You made a terrible mistake. But you are still the person I chose to build a life with. And I still want that life, even if it looks different than I thought it would. She started to cry, but they were good tears this time, tears of relief and gratitude. I reached over and took her hand, and we sat there together in the warm summer night, two imperfect people trying to find their way back to each other. The road ahead was still long. We still had financial struggles. We still had trust to rebuild. We still had scars that would probably never fully heal. But we also had something we had not had in a long time. We had hope. My mother eventually managed to refinance her home equity loan at a better interest rate, which made the payments more manageable. Emma got promoted at the dental office and started earning a little more money. I got a small raise at work. Slowly, painfully, we started to climb out of the hole we had fallen into. Sophie grew and thrived, resilient and adaptable in the way children are. She would never remember a time when money was not tight, when we did not have to carefully consider every purchase. But she would also grow up understanding the value of things, the importance of hard work and sacrifice and family. 2 years after the scam, we had managed to save $5,000. It was a fraction of what we had lost, but it felt like a fortune. We had a family meeting and decided together how to use it. Sophie voted for a trip to Disney World. Emma wanted to put it toward paying down debt. I suggested we split it, use half for a modest vacation and half for savings. In the end, we compromised. We took a long weekend trip to a beach a few hours away, staying in a cheap motel and eating sandwiches we made in the room. It was not fancy or glamorous, but it was ours. We built sandcastles and collected shells and watched the sunset over the ocean. Sophie laughed and played, and for a few days, we were just a normal family on vacation. On the last night, after Sophie had fallen asleep between us in the motel bed, Emma turned to me in the darkness. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" I asked. "For not giving up on us," she said. "For fighting for our family, even when it would have been easier to walk away." I thought about that. It would have been easier to leave, to start over, to cut my losses and move on. But easier is not always better. Sometimes the hard thing, the painful thing, is also the right thing. "I love you," I said. "I am still angry sometimes. I still have moments when I remember what you did, and it hurts all over again. But I love you, and I choose to keep loving you." She kissed me then, soft and gentle, and it felt like a promise. A promise that we would keep trying, keep working, keep choosing each other even when it was hard. My mother came to visit the following week. She brought a painting she had made, a watercolor of our house with Sophie playing in the front yard. It was beautiful, full of light and color and life. She had written on the back, "For my son and his family. May you always find your way home." I hung it in the living room, where I could see it every day. A reminder of where we had been and where we were going. A reminder that family is messy and complicated and sometimes painful, but also worth fighting for. The scam had taken so much from us. Money, yes, but also innocence and trust and the comfortable certainty that the people we loved would never hurt us. But it had also taught us things. It had taught us that love is not just a feeling, but a choice, a daily decision to show up and do the work. It had taught us that forgiveness is not about forgetting or excusing, but about releasing the poison of anger and resentment so it does not destroy you from the inside. It had taught us that we were stronger than we thought, more resilient, more capable of surviving, and even thriving in the face of disaster. Years later, when Sophie was older and asked about that time, about why we had been so stressed and why money had been so tight, we told her the truth. We told her about the scam and the betrayal and the long, hard road back. We told her about the mistakes we had made and the lessons we had learned. She listened carefully, her young face serious. "So Grandma and Mom made a really bad choice," she said. "And it hurt our family." "Yes," Emma said. "We made a really bad choice. And we have spent years trying to make it right." "But you stayed together," Sophie said. "You did not give up." "No," I said, reaching over to take Emma's hand. "We did not give up. Sophie nodded, processing this. I think that is brave, she said finally. It would have been easier to give up. But you chose the hard thing. Out of the mouths of babes, my mother said softly. She was there too, sitting in our living room, part of our family again. Not the same as before, but something new and maybe even stronger. That night, after everyone had gone home and Sophie was asleep, Emma and I sat together on the couch. The house was quiet and peaceful. The bills were paid. There was food in the refrigerator. We had a little money in savings. It was not the life we had planned, not the easy, comfortable existence we had once taken for granted. But it was ours, built from the rubble of disaster, held together by choice and commitment and love. Nobody imagines what happened, I thought. Nobody imagines that the people they trust most will betray them. Nobody imagines that their life can fall apart so quickly and completely. But also nobody imagines how strong they can be, how much they can endure, how far they can come back from the edge. We had been broken, but we had also been rebuilt. And maybe, just maybe, we were better for it,